A very good evening. You're watching Newsx and I'm Shivani Singh. In a historic first, the G20 summit unfolds in Johannesburg, South Africa, the continent's debut as host. Amid global tensions, including a US boycott under President Trump, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, however, arrived on Friday, warmly welcomed by host Cyril Ramaphosa, kicking off a three-day push for inclusive growth in his opening plenary. Modi called for ditching outdated development models that exploit resources and widen inequalities, invoking India's integral humanism as a blueprint for sustainable progress. He spotlighted Africa's vulnerabilities and India's role in granting the African Union permanent G20 membership last year. Modi unveiled three bold initiatives: a global traditional knowledge repository to harness ancient wisdom, the G20 Africa Skills Multiplier, training 1 million African youth, and a crackdown on the drug terror nexus. On the sidelines, he shared laughs with Italy's Giorgia Meloni, discussed defence and trade with Australia's Anthony Albanese, and eyes talks with Japan's Sanae Takaichi. The draft declaration, defying US pushback, slams climate inaction as a crisis. As sessions continue, Modi's vision amplifies the Global South's voice in a divided world. I want to take this conversation forward with guests and my panelists who are actually joining us on this broadcast. For now, we have Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, joining us. However, later on, we will also be joined by Ambassador Manju Seth, and who is a former diplomat, and Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. So I want to obviously go across, I believe Madhav Nalapat has joined us on the broadcast. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We appreciate your time. I want to start off this discussion with you. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for a more inclusive global order, and his first address actually emphasizes on the voice of the Global South. He has been stating that there has been growth, but that growth has been unequal, and we need to fix that right now.
Well, Prime Minister Modi is absolutely right, and may I point out, I think this is the first G20 summit to be held in Africa, if I'm not mistaken, and securing the African Union's admission into the G20 was very much championed by Prime Minister Modi. He has championed the cause of Africa from the very beginning. He has championed the cause of the Global South from the very beginning. And that's why I'm told a meeting is taking place of India, Brazil, and South Africa, three of the largest countries in Asia, South America, and Africa. So, and of course, Prime Minister Albanese is an old friend of India. But I'd like to say that this shows the commitment of Prime Minister Modi to developing ties with the African continent, now South Africa. And because Trump was completely boycotted. There's nobody from the US delegation there. There's a very junior level official whose job is to take notes of what's going on. And of course, fortunately, there was a declaration. Vladimir Putin is not there because of this criminal warrant against him. And I personally feel that the G20 should adopt a resolution that at least, for those countries that are ready, that Putin should not be touched when he attends a G20 meeting. What is the sanctity of a G20 meeting when one of your own members is subject to sanctions from some other G20 members? And I'd like to point out very honestly that, you don't have Putin, you don't have Xi, you don't have Trump. And Trump, the entire US delegation has boycotted the whole function. Nobody is there, not even the Secretary of State Rubio, not even a junior official, only a very, very junior official from the consular section there who's taking down notes and not participating in the talks. Well, I think that is basically the loss of the United States because the global south is important, and it's the loss of China because the global south, as I said, is important. And as for President Putin, I'm sure he would have come, but for that warrant, which frankly certain countries have done to him. Now the European countries, Chancellor Merz, Prime Minister Starmer, President Macron, they are not there for G20. They are there for a meeting with an uninvited guest, Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. And Zelensky wants to cry on their shoulders about what he is being asked to do by President Trump. The fact of the matter is, this is the only realistic way out for him. And if he does not accept this plan, there's going to be more bloodshed, and most of the blood spilled will be Ukrainian blood. So I hope Zelensky sees common sense. But I doubt very much that his European partners, the three leaders whom I mentioned, that they also see it the way Zelensky sees it, that somehow you have to roll back Russia when actually Russia has been securing victory after victory on the battlefield in the last several months, and is likely to continue. What is a very unfortunate war to continue. Prime Minister Modi was the first global statesperson to say this is a time of peace, not a time of war, in the presence of President Putin. And unfortunately, Zelensky did not heed his wise advice, and the consequence has been, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have suffered the loss of their lives, their limbs, their livelihoods. I mean, the whole country has been devastated. So I don't know what Zelensky wants to do by continuing this hopeless war, but I do hope that he sees common sense and adopts this peace plan, which frankly is exactly what the Prime Minister wanted at the very start of this conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So I'd like to point out that yes, the Prime Minister's presence is indicative of the importance he attaches to the global south, to South Africa, and I think the reason why the Americans stayed away is because South Africa took the leading role in basically getting the International Criminal Court to classify Prime Minister Netanyahu as a war criminal. Now, I have my own views on that. The fact is there was a terrible terror attack on Israel, and Netanyahu has responded after that attack. But whatever the merits of the situation, the fact of the matter is the Americans kept away almost everybody except one very junior official. Putin has kept away from force of circumstances. She has kept away probably because Trump is not there. She wants to meet Trump. And when Trump is not there, what's the point, he asks himself, of coming? That shows the importance or lack of it that she attaches to the G20 and the global south. Prime Minister Modi is the very opposite. He attaches great importance to the global south and great importance to South Africa, and that is why he is there in person. And I watched visuals of him entering the hall, and President Ramaphosa, a very outstanding individual, greet him with a namaste. It's a wonderful way of greeting the Indian Prime Minister. So, and also I'm very happy that a statement has been adopted despite the American boycott. And South Africa and other countries have minced no words in condemning the behavior of those who boycott such an important summit. It's a very important summit, and the global south is going to play a more and more important role in the future. Don't forget, today Asia accounts for more than double the trade volume with the United States as Europe does, double. So Asia is becoming very important, Africa is becoming important, South America is becoming important, and to ignore these three very important continents, as President Trump is doing and as President Xi Jinping is doing, to me it makes no sense at all. Thank you.
Absolutely. In fact, let me just go across to Ambassador Manju Seth. we are looking at Prime Minister Narendra Modi pushing forward that vision. His vision is amplifying the role of the global south, the voice of the global south, and India seems to be leading it in a world which seems to be divided. We are seeing wars, we are seeing geopolitical crisis, erupting day after day. Ma'am, I want to understand, do you think that this push, that this vision that our Prime Minister is actually pushing forward, how realistic is it? Because we want to seek a path of development where everyone gets equal shares. It's not unequal. We are not looking at some people or some part of the population being deprived of resources. We are looking at integral humanism. That's what Prime Minister Narendra Modi is talking about. Human, society, nature all growing together.
Absolutely. I think we have taken that approach, and the Prime Minister has articulated that also, not only now but even earlier during India's G20 presidency, that of how we would like to take everybody along the concept of Vasudev Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future, and to work together so that everybody is taken along, and not what has been the approach so far on the world stage of only me. And I think that is a very clear indication, the fact that Prime Minister is there, and he has spoken about the need for all countries to work together, and especially the developing countries, their needs to be addressed. And that's how the voice of the Global South was represented at the G20 summits, beginning in Delhi, then after that at Brazil, and even at this particular G20 summit, which is an important global forum for focusing on economic issues, but also now its mandate has been diversified, as we can see, and many more items, including energy transition, climate crisis, rare earths and critical minerals, energy transition, renewable energy. So many more items which are interconnected but not directly economic in nature are on the agenda. And I think the fact that India has, and along with South Africa, of course, and other countries of the Global South, has put these on the table as being the focus of the G20, and where its actions should be directed at. And also, if you look at the fact that this is the first G20 being held in Africa after the African Union became a member, I think is also a very positive development, and it also gives South Africa the chance to showcase that what Africa is today, what are Africa's concerns, what are Africa's plus points and strengths, and how they would like to participate in the global development, and the new innovations. The AI is being also discussed, and new technologies, new innovations. So all that together is important, not only for the core G20 members, but for the rest of the Global South as well.
Absolutely.
And the fact that the three leaders have not come, I think, as very rightly mentioned by Professor Nalapat, it is something which is not very good for the G20. It would have been, ideal if all G20, leaders were there to discuss very important and critical matters which are of relevance to all member countries.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I think over here, a very pertinent point that Africa is for the first time holding this G20 summit, and that itself says what a good, stance the Global South has currently. If I can go across to Gautam Mukherjee, sir, your perspective on this whole talk about one earth, one family that our Prime Minister is speaking about. In fact, he also spoke about a global knowledge repository. Now, this should be powered, in fact, by India's, ancient knowledge systems. He's talking about how we can carry forward this collective knowledge for humanity. That seems like a very great idea going forward.
Well, this particular G20 summit has placed the focus very strongly on the African Union countries, because most of Europe, as well as America, Russia, and China are missing at this summit. India is going to be heading the G20 next year, so it was very important for it to be there, and also because it has championed the cause of the global South. China is not there, but it has invested over $30 billion in development projects in different parts of Africa. Russia has traditionally always been of help and use in Africa, and India is increasingly investing and involving itself in bilateral trade with different countries, more so since the championing of the African Union. Several African countries have come forward to trade and involve itself in other bilateral issues with India, such as armaments and technology. So this is a period in which I think the launch of Africa on equal footing with the rest of the world is being supported by certain countries. Japan is present, Australia is present, we are there. There is every chance that on a bilateral basis and with the tendency to enter into free trade agreements one-on-one with a number of countries, as well as conglomerate countries such as the EU. We also are working on one with Israel, which has been dormant for 10 years but has become active now. So with the decline in the WTO, the role of organizations such as BRICS and the G20 has become very important for continued global trade and cooperation. The Prime Minister is underlining health, underlining knowledge, and underlining regional cooperation between the African countries as well as countries farther afield, such as India. So this is altogether the shape of things to come and has every chance of unleashing the tremendous potential of Africa, which largely has a history of being exploited rather than being cooperated with. So this may be a brand new beginning.
Absolutely.
One of the reasons that America is wary of the G20 as well as BRICS is because of the decline of the use of the American dollar as an international currency of trade, and more efforts to deal in individual country currencies on a bilateral basis, as well as alternative currencies such as yuan, which he or America sees as a threat. To talk of South Africa being hostile to its native white population is a bit of a canard and has been used as an excuse to stay away. I think that India is emerging as a major player on the global stage, and with the support of the African Union, South America, Japan, Australia, and other countries which are not completely allied to NATO and the United States, this is going to flow in a different way. Our own trade with China is increasing in leaps and bounds, even as the tariffs are still in place, and the agreement with the trade agreement with America is still in the works, but not quite signed. So I think the shifting sands all around, and I think a lot of it is to the benefit of India as well as other countries in the global south.
Absolutely. I think, when you mentioned the decline of the WTO, the Prime Minister has been pushing forward for a rule-based multi-layered trading system, and that has been something that he has been looking forward to develop, I think, previously as well. He met with his Australian counterpart as well, Albanese, and he's discussed trade, nuclear power, and other issues as well. So, if I can come across, however, to Professor Nalapat, sir, the focus is on Africa, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also highlighted how the Africa has been very vulnerable because it has borne the brunt of not getting that sort of development that it deserves. And one of the things that he mentioned in his first address was a G20 Africa skills multiplier initiative. He is planning that there should be 1 million certified trainers in South Africa in over the next 10 years, and this should be like a train the trainers model. How do you look at that?
Well, I think it's a brilliant idea, and in my personal view, the African continent is very rich in natural resources, probably richer than North America, probably richer than many other parts of the world. And the reality is, as has correctly been pointed out earlier, Africa has been, the riches have gone basically to other countries. They have been mined by other countries, the profits have gone to other countries, almost nothing has come back to Africa and to the people of Africa, even though the people of Africa are hardworking, willing to, and very, very capable of mastering science and technology, as capable of as anybody else. So I quite agree that what we need is a more equitable world order, and also a world order which underpinned by an absence of violence, absence of using war as a means to settle disputes. And in this, for example, the existing conflicts, including Ukraine, I feel should be wound down. Prime Minister has always stood for that. He stood for peace in Ukraine right from the beginning of this horrible war, and he stands for it now. And you can see his credentials for peace by the fact that in a very few days he called off Operation Sindoor when India was on the strategic offensive, because he's fundamentally a man of peace and not a man of war. So I think all in all, the G20 summit is going off fairly well under circumstances. The boycott has not worked. The complete US boycott has not worked. At the same time, I'd like to point out India and the United States are important partners. United States has always been a very important partner of India for the last several decades, and it will continue to be so, and a partner in science and technology. So even though the G20, the US is not there, engagement with the United States and India is proceeding on very, very many levels, including defense, technology, etc. Rare earths, for example, the Prime Minister signed an agreement with some African countries which are rich in rare earths. So obviously, the world is looking to diversify sources of critical materials, and in that diversification process, Africa will play a central role. So I think, frankly, there is no reason why anybody should doubt that the African continent is going to play a leading role, and that's why Prime Minister Modi is absolutely right in stressing the centrality of Africa in global development. What he seeks is a model in which there's equitable development. And that may be a long time coming, but at least we can all work towards it, and certainly India is working towards it. Thank you, Shivani.
Absolutely. Ambassador Manju Seth, if I can rope you back into this discussion, when we are talking about, this global value chain system that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has stated, he stated that we need a very resilient and we need an inclusive global value chain system among the regional partners and among the global south. But in this summit as well, we are seeing some very big names missing. We are seeing that US is not attended, Russia is not there, China is not there. So do you believe that this framework that our Prime Minister is actually talking about, do you think that this could practically reduce the geopolitical shocks, could protect us or protect the global south from the geopolitical shocks? Because currently we are in a world that's full of tariff wars.
Absolutely. I don't think, it's going to completely shield the global south from the pulls and pressures and the tariff wars that have been unleashed, particularly or unilaterally, should I say, by the US. I think we can only try and find alternative markets, and it holds true for all the affected countries, and that's what everyone is doing. And I think to have resilience in supply chains and value chains everywhere, I think we have to, look at ensuring that we strengthen ourselves so that these tariffs, as Prime Minister has been saying, Atmanirbharta, Make in India for the world, etc. All these are important initiatives. But at the same time, we can't completely isolate ourselves and say everything will be made within India. It's not possible and it's not doable. But what is doable is that we have production within the country in areas of our strength, and which add value and which add, which add to the GDP, to the growth of the country, and also, other countries do a similar, their strengths, they play to their strengths and develop their markets and their own manufacturing, so that there is a mutually beneficial exchange of mutually beneficial trading system is put in place, particularly after the WTO has almost been completely sort of sidelined, and everybody is in for, the major countries, at least the Western world, is trying to just safeguard its own interests, irrespective of how it impacts the interests of other countries. While that is well within their right, they are well within their rights to protect their interests as they should. But there has to be a kind of trading system or a system in place that looks at, that's what India has been saying, that looks at ensuring a win-win situation for all countries. And in that, I think it is important that while we, for instance, India has always said that we will share our development, growth, our innovations, like in the UPI and other systems, and the AI is another area, the fintech system, all that, in the strengths that we have, we strengthen those, and we share it with the rest of the developing world. And I think that's what we have been doing. Our development and our developmental growth has always been, it has been looked at with positivity by the Global South mostly, and they would like to learn from our developmental experience, and we have been sharing that with them. And I think that has been our approach always, and I'm sure it will continue to be so. And in this particular, global churn that is going on with the tariff wars, and the fact that markets overnight are being strangled because of this, manufacturing has come to a halt because suddenly there's nowhere to sell. So you look for alternatives, and each country is trying now to ensure its best interests, including through FTAs. And like India has signed with the UK and sort of negotiating with the EU and with other countries, and I think that's where the future trajectory is. And I believe that we cannot have complete Atmanirbharta across the board, but that's where we should be emphasizing and where we should be aiming for. And each country, I think, wherever it has strengths, will develop and its own manufacturing as well. And I think that will be a win-win for all countries.
Absolutely. And if I can go across to, Gautam Mukherjee, sir, we are talking about some of the proposals that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi actually put out. And you have spoken about how he also, wanted a G20 healthcare response team that would, rapidly, the medical experts would be ready for rapid deployment if there is any health crisis. That seems to be a lesson that we learned after the entire COVID crisis that the world went through. But over here we are also talking about the drug nexus and how to stop the financing, because that's very important, and that's what our Prime Minister in fact stated, that that drug nexus has to be stopped.
Yes, Shivani, this hasn't been emphasized enough. It is something that Trump talks a lot about in terms of fentanyl, which is manufactured in China and pumped into the United States. But there is enormous drug addiction also in different parts of Africa, and it is something that can be stopped if there is collective effort on the part of the African Union and other developing countries or developed countries, because this is also linked quite often with terrorism, global terrorism, which is another major plank of every speech that our Prime Minister makes abroad, because it is a scourge that affects us deeply, as well as a number of other countries, because the two are, syncretic. The drug money fuels terrorism, terrorism fuels drug money, there's extortion, there is murder, mayhem. So this is indeed not something that one can ignore, and it is something that I think will be taken up much more seriously after this G20 summit. Shivani.
All right. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time for this discussion, but I thank Ambassador Manjunath, Gautam Mukherjee, and Professor Madhav Nalapat for joining us on this discussion. Now,